Welcome to my art form.
It's time for Post-Orthodoxy, a show about changing our minds.
Yeah, baby.
With your hosts, Dark and Ainsley Sevier.
Maybe what they believe about reality isn't all of reality.
What?
I know, right?
We're on a mission to have a better time with more people more often.
The question is more, how do you get there?
Post-Orthodoxy explores strongly held beliefs, how those belief systems divide or connect people, and what might be found beyond those reality bubbles.
Keep calm. Don't lose your head.
I've got a piece of chocolate here with me because I got anxiety about doing this.
Welcome to this neighborhood, neighbor.
All right. We're going to make a wild guess and say that was the right time to go live.
Keep calm. Don't lose your head.
Welcome to this neighborhood, neighbor. And here we are. We're back with episode 23 of Post-Orthodoxy, an auspicious number.
23?
Yes, you like it.
I do. There's a whole story. Look up.
The number 23.
The 23 Enigma.
Or don't.
If
you value your sanity.
Okay, I have very much excite.
So much excite?
Concerning today's show.
Cool.
We have a number of things that we have talking about.
Tell me about it.
I don't know in what order, and we may, in the way that we do it, we may start somewhere, end up somewhere else, and then try to get back to where we started, tying it all up with a pretty bow.
It's true.
Doesn't always happen that way, but often it does, and I like it. So I have a number of topics that you put in our little show card.
Mm-hmm.
We want to talk about the media.
Oh, the media.
I think it's an important subject. As a matter of fact, we are currently in negotiations to have a very special guest on our show. Somebody whose name I'm not going to use.
No, because we haven't decided yet if we're going to be interviewing this person as themselves or as the anonymous leader of I acknowledge psychedelic class warfare exists, a Facebook group that we've been following for a long time.
If you're on Facebook, you can find I acknowledge psychedelic class warfare exists.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is a good place to start the show. By the way,
psychedelic class warfare.
Viewer discretion advised. We're talking about ideas here.
Yes.
We're talking about a lot of ideas.
Belief systems.
Some of these ideas may change for us in the course of the show.
Or over the next year.
You might be able to change our ideas. You might be able to call out a bias and say, look around the bias and there's more information. And we'll say, we'll check it out. And we might change our ideas. Your ideas might change, so don't get mad.
Yes, getting mad about somebody challenging your ideas is a defense mechanism because of primal stuff going on in our brains. When we are presented with the possibility that something I thought was the way things are isn't necessarily the way things are, we feel unsafe primally. This is the secret emotion that happens that a lot of people aren't aware is happening, and they just go straight to feeling offended or hurt.
What our friend Joseph Myers calls the amygdala hijack.
Yes, a secret emotion pops up, a function in the back of your brain that you're not usually aware of unless you've done a lot of work to be aware of the functions happening in the back of your brain. And that function tells you thought you were safe because you thought you knew what was going on, but you don't actually know what's going on, so you can't actually feel safe. And then you have to react by fighting it, this like unknown animal of not knowing what's going on.
Right.
And a lot of people fight that feeling of, I don't know what's going on, which if you do some work and you get used to it and you ride the ragged edge of disaster of learning new things and you like jumping out of airplanes or bungee jumping or thrilling things where you might die. This is the sort of thing where your ideas might die, but it also might be really fun. And if you get used to the feeling of the unknown, you can begin to find the unknown exciting instead of terrifying.
Right. It often does the same feeling inside.
Yes.
It's about your associations.
A thrill. You'll get a thrill, and you can associate that thrill with yay or with
We'd like to also say the reason we do this show and the way that we do it is that we have this little chat bot. If you're watching us on Twitch, on YouTube, or on Facebook, you can comment You can get involved in the dialogue, which
Yes.
is why we have this. It's not just an incidental thing. It's the form of the show.
No, this chatbot is here for all of us, and especially for you guys.
Yeah, Monday we don't have a guest. You are our guests. Thanks for coming and sitting in on this conversation. I would like to say hello to the people in the future
Oh. And
who will not be watching this live,
yes.
but
We
will be
appreciate
watching
you.
it later. Still comment, because I often find myself responding in the future
It's true.
to comments that we had in the past. So if
we're-
you comment live in the comment thread as things go, then we can also respond in the future as well. if
We're
we don't
slowly
get to you
working
in the
it into
show.
our daily routine to spend some time online with you guys in our digital neighborhood.
Right.
Actually interacting on these awesome and terrifying topics that we like to bring up. You see the little topic map that I'm showing our audience right now?
I do. I see it. Yeah.
So these are the things we're hoping to get through today.
We'll see if we do it.
One of them might explode into the world's biggest, most awesomest subject.
I wanted to read an I acknowledge psychedelic class warfare exists bit.
Do
Four little points. So I'll read a point and then we
Okay.
can discuss it. So this is a piece. This is why I want to have him on the show, and I think it's a good way to start one of the main topics of today's show. This is a post made by our friend over there who said 4 under-discussed drivers of why journalism in the USA sucks. And I would say maybe even beyond the USA, but that's really where most of our interest or most of our focus is. So we'll stick within the continental
Yeah.
and Hawaii
Sure
and
thing.
Alaska.
This particular country.
This particular country. Number 1, the prestige of the profession from the 60s and 70s pushed credentialism in getting the, quote, best people from the best universities. So what he's talking about there is in the 60s and 70s, journalists were doing good work as the fourth estate, holding power accountable, corporate power, political power.
Welcome to my art.
That made heroes of certain journalists. Woodward and Bernstein, for example, they're the ones who broke the Watergate scandal.
What they believe about
The
reality
newspaper organization
all of
has a budget, and they gave money to these journalists to spend months breaking a story that changed history.
Post-Orthodoxy explores
That made everybody want to be a journalist.
how those belief systems divide
And so the prestige of it made it suddenly you had to be from people from nice universities started coming in, and it all became about your credentials as a journalist. Whereas the people who made it a prestigious profession often were not highly credentialed journalists. They were people who were more akin to detectives or some sort, or good writers that could sleuth and get to the bottom of a story that had impacts. in
People who
people's
were
lives.
motivated by finding out the truth. You don't need a bachelor's degree to be motivated to find out the truth.
No, it does help to be able to spit a good line to convey a point.
Oh yeah, some writing classes.
yes.
Some exercises in metaphor. You get most of that just by
Understanding
reading
some
quality literature.
Understanding some psychology
Yeah.
of how you are interpreting the world.
Yes.
Helps you understand how other people are interpreting your interpretation of the world. All these things are really useful. Number 2, the death of local newspaper businesses. Oh, wait, the death of local newspaper business models, thanks to online classifieds, has completely destroyed both the robust local investigative reporting ecosystem and one of the easy paths for journeyman style paying your dues. So the idea is like you could get a job at the Montana Standard, local newspaper,
Finding out things that are happening
paid.
locally
Yeah,
and
get
share them
paid.
with people.
develop your chops, and then maybe move into a larger, bigger organization. But now they don't have the money for investigative journalism.
Okay.
You're not going to learn to be an investigative journalist at your local newspaper anymore because they don't afford you the kind of budget that allows you to do in-depth reporting. Just go cover the dog park thing or cover this thing or go report the news. There's a difference in reporting the news and doing investigative journalism, and a lot of people don't know the difference. So people are still paid to report the news. Not a lot of people are paid to do investigative journalism. So that's number 2. Number 3, media consolidation by people who share the same interests and biases. If you owned a newspaper or a radio station or a TV station, you might be a person with a particular bent. People don't own those things anymore. Big conglomerates own them. And so we've all seen the Sinclair network thing where all the news people, all the boxes start showing up and all the news people are saying the exact same lines, the exact same spin that's made to look like it's coming out of their mouth, but it's all being regurgitated from the larger big data.
They've all been given a script.
This is why media sucks.
Right. Reporters are different than journalists, and I feel as though even the term reporter has changed definitions over time.
You just mean somebody who can read the teleprompter, and what's on the teleprompter, a lot of times they haven't read before they're reading it. But they read it like, I have feelings about this.
I totally know that this is the case.
Right.
Now, I have friends in the
media.
I
have hairspray, and I have the thing, and so I'm just going to read the thing, and it gives it legitimacy because of all the red, white, and blue stuff behind me and all that business. Reporting, and hey, a good reporter is great.
Great.
I'm not bagging on reporters.
We're just talking about the job in the institution and how it has changed over time.
So, but yeah, journalism has suffered.
Yes.
Number 4, the dominance of TV cable news over print prioritizes sensationalism over the possibility of depth. Clickbait.
Something that makes you feel awesome rather than something that is actually accurate or irrelevant or important.
Exactly.
That's one of our points today that we're hoping to get to is an issue that we've been having on Post-Orthodoxy is like we've been trying really hard, especially even since the beginning of our mother show, Copacetic Conversations, to have reasonable, logical, calm, productive, all of these things just give me a thrill in my heart, discourse on difficult subjects that people usually get so emotional about that they can't have a productive conversation with their neighbors. And something that Dark and I have been struggling with over the past few weeks is like maybe the only way to get the spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. Like, not that we've done a massive advertising campaign to get folks involved in the conversations that we're having.
We haven't done any promotion of our show.
But I do think that there's something to be said for people like Jimmy Dore and people like Alex Jones and people like Rachel Maddow.
Whether you agree with them or not.
Whether you agree with any of those people, Tucker Carlson, Rachel Maddow, Jimmy Dore, like all of these people, they are emotional.
They emotionalize the story.
They take the facts and then they have emotions about it.
They tickle your amygdala.
And then you get to have emotions about it.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe we should do that, but for good. Because I sort of am like...
We can discuss it. We can experiment. Let's be emotional later on in the show. We'll save it for later.
I just feel like it's not productive.
I like doing it.
I know.
I'm going to finish up this little post here. In short, it's a bunch of out-of-touch elites concentrated in New York City and Los Angeles who agree more than they disagree, even on apparently different ends of the spectrum. This is not a recipe for healthy public discourse. So anyway, we hope to be having a successful negotiation to have the author of that post on our show sometime in the near future.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Like to thank Ainsley for being our production person while also being star of the show.
Well, I don't know about the star of the show part, but
a star of the show.
I put some makeup on and I show up and I try to smile at the camera lens.
So I have a bunch of stuff. Where do you want to start?
Let's see. Well, we've already sort of talked about the Fourth Estate is dead. Long live the Fourth Estate.
Now, I made a post last week concerning a tweet by Michael Levitt, who is talking about some COVID data out of Israel. We have stayed away from talking about COVID data because it'll make us lose friends real quick. And there's the very real chance of losing the platform if you are not.
I think that's one of the most alarming things that's been happening over the last couple of weeks. that half of my friends think is a great idea.
Censorship.
Which is the government should be allowed to tell your social media platforms who's allowed to say things on the internet on those platforms. And I suppose if you... I had someone say to me recently that censorship...
Be very careful.
Censorship is something that we do to protect ourselves.
Oh, Jesus.
And I was like...
Censorship is never okay, in my opinion. It's never
radical
okay.
censorship.
My personal feeling is the truth should be able to withstand scrutiny.
Well, censorship isn't about keeping the truth from being scrutinized or keeping a lie from being scrutinized. Censorship is about protecting the weak-minded from being overwhelmed by a lie.
Oh, I have a piece on that. I have a thing that I want to say about that. That's one of the notes that I added at the very end.
Censorship isn't like, people are like, well, if it can stand up, then we should let it fly. Like, maybe Hillary Clinton really is a pedophile, and it's like, okay, it's not about the data being scrutinized. Censorship is out there because the censorship is designed to keep the quote unquote the weak-minded from being overwhelmed by bad information. We need to protect people
That's the rationale of the censorship.
We have to protect people from information that they might not know is bad for them.
So the mainstream media and the press secretary, which I want to get into, Biden's press secretary and some statement she made about how the government's going to be flagging sites for the social media empires to come and remove. And also, she likes the idea as the propagandist for the administration, and that's that's a real term. That's not a pejorative.
Propagandist?
Yeah, she's a propagandist. Public relations, same thing. The term public relations was used, the guy that invented that term, which was...
Sigmund Freud's nephew.
Yeah, Sigmund Freud's nephew.
Bernard.
Anyway, he used the term public relations because he thought the term propaganda had bad connotations.
Yes, because the Nazis used it.
Right.
He was like,
Edward Bernays. So Edward Bernays said, well, we can't use the term propaganda, so...
Because people associate it with the Nazis. I don't know why.
We'll just call it public relations.
Yeah, that sounds so nice.
The press secretary is the public relations agent for the administration.
So it's...
Propagandist.
It's her job to make sure that the president is seen to be saying smart things.
So propaganda has a bad name. Some propaganda I think can be good. I always like to use the crying Indian thing. That was total propaganda.
Like positive propaganda.
Emotional manipulation that kept some people I know from throwing their McDonald's stuff out the car window. And that's some good propaganda.
Oh, here's something. The government's use of public relations and propaganda. A book by Belinda Helmke. Propaganda is one-way communication aimed at exclusively profiting the sender and manipulating the receiver's response and behavior.
Correct. That is the mainstream media and the press secretary. That is their job.
Their job is to, yes. But she goes on to say, public relations, on the other hand, is a two-way communication process.
Oh, is it?
The goal of which is to be mutually beneficial to both the organization and its publics. Wouldn't it be nice?
I like that idea.
If all of the suffragettes were mutually benefited by becoming lifelong smokers.
As a part of a cigarette ad campaign?
Instead of...
In a public relations campaign?
That sounds so mutually beneficial.
So mutually beneficial. Well, they had liberty sticks now. They were liberated.
Nice phallic sticks to prove that they're just as manly as the dudes and should be allowed to vote.
So the mainstream media, and the press secretary, propagandist, they do one-size-fits-all simplifications of current events. This is what most of our news is. This is one-size-fits-all.
Yes.
For example, and I know this is going to be controversial, but we should be past it at this point, but we're not, and so I'm going to say it again. Just wear a mask.
Right.
We were... perceived to be anti-maskers because we were critiquing
how it was being said.
How you were trying to get in a hyper-divided country. You were trying to shame the people you disagreed with into action. How often does that work?
Oh, only for the first 18 years.
For some people, much longer, apparently.
For some people, way shorter, and they get the fuck out of that house.
Right. So the just wear a mask was a thing, and it's a famous thing at the beginning of this pandemic. long-standing medical tradition. You only wear masks in certain situations. Otherwise, they become unsanitary. You just don't wear masks all the time.
Yes.
Long-standing. Suddenly, Fauci goes, no, everybody should be wearing a mask.
Everybody should totally do it.
Suddenly he's like, yes, everybody should wear a mask. And then suddenly the CDC said everybody should wear a mask. And then the Surgeon General said everybody should wear a mask.
And the WHO changed his mind too.
And this lady, this press secretary says, somebody brought that up, the press secretary.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, things evolve and science evolves and changes. That wasn't an evolution of science.
No.
That was give some people something to do so that they can feel like they are protecting themselves, but it really doesn't have any very serious or
masking does not have any documented effect on your exposure to the virus.
So when you're working at Taco Bell and you're wearing a mask and you're taking it down every time you talk to somebody, that is not a medical device anymore.
Even a properly worn, extremely efficient, high-grade medical or scientific mask does not keep you from encountering a virus over the long term.
Okay, that's too nuanced.
And most people don't have... Oh, okay. So anyway,
give them something to do.
We're not talking about nuance.
Give people something to do.
Yes.
Wear a mask. Now they can protect themselves and they can be a part of the push, which is going to bring me to the Panic paper, which is a German paper that came out in the spring of last year that basically was their propaganda on how to make people afraid so that they would comply.
They're not the only country that has set this up.
Right.
Magical Mango on YouTube says, I think being emotional about certain topics can be constructive.
Yes.
The big thing, in my opinion, is to be able to have empathy for the counter argument and being able to maybe admit when you're wrong.
We like this.
I love it. Can we be emotional beings? Like, I feel like in other countries, we've done this thing in the U.S., and maybe this is just our thread for the show, but we've done this thing in the U.S. and the West, but most of the U.S., where we shut down people's emotions. Men aren't supposed to have emotions.
It's our news.
Women aren't supposed to have emotions. Like,
all the news anchors are shrinks. They are meant to just deliver the news with a little bit of range, which gives everything equal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was listening
They're using the techniques of therapists.
I was listening to NPR the other day, and it was like talking about some local event, whatever. The 5 little bits of news they give you at the top of the hour, headlines, basically, audio headlines on the radio. You don't get to click and read the rest of the article and see what happened or what the content. And they were just talking about, like, this thing happened in Russia, and this thing happened in Ohio, and then, and also 6 children and 2 women were killed in a drive-by shooting in Chicago, and now some music.
Yes.
And I'm just like, why the fuck am I hearing about that in Montana?
Right.
Why am I hearing about 7 people being killed, 8 people being killed in Chicago? Why am I hearing about...
Just got to sprinkle a little blood for interest.
If you're going to talk about that, then lead into a story about gun control, or lead into a story about gun rights, or lead into a story about affordable housing, or lead into a story about gang violence. But no, they just dump that headline on me, and I'm like, what is the point of me knowing this in Montana?
It's called "If It Bleeds, It Leads." That's an old news trope.
We've suppressed all our emotions in this country. When you went to South Africa, you were surrounded by emotional people.
Yes.
Everybody was just like, I am sad, I am happy.
I felt more at home in South Africa than I do here. People were actually more embracing, more loving, I could connect to people quicker and easier.
Yeah.
Than I can.
Well, because they were being honest.
They were being honest. So the premise is the mainstream media, and for example, we're going to get to this in a second, the press secretary, the propagandist, the public relations officer for the administration.
For Biden, President Biden.
They do one size fits all. Be afraid, be happy, be patriotic, be sad. And there are folks out here, I consider myself one of them, that would like to know and understand more about that subject. So when they say, don't wear masks, and then a week later they say, everybody wear a mask, an alarm goes off, and I'm like, what happened?
What changed?
What is different about this virus that suddenly a mask is effective against a virus? I'm like, that is fascinating. Let's go find out why this virus is so different that masks work.
Oh, wait, it's not.
Oh, it wasn't. That wasn't the case.
They just changed their minds. And then when they
changed their
got
minds.
called out on it later, they said, well, no, we just had to do that. We only told people not to wear masks so that there would be enough for people that actually need it, like doctors and nurses. And it's like, so wait, you're saying that you were just lying to the American public?
Yes.
that they should not wear a mask that was going to save their lives.
But you should totally believe us this time.
But totally believe us this time.
And if you call us out on this, we'll give you another line next week to make you feel good about it. It's completely insane.
Right.
So, like, I want to do research. I want to find out stuff. And this is why we got kicked off the radio. This is why we are banned media, is because we went and we said, one size fits all is not good enough for me because I'm talking to an audience and I care about my audience. And I'm like, hey, maybe there's some more information so we can help take care of each other in this pandemic. That was the motivation. How can we help take care of each other in the pandemic? Who's really at risk? And how do we take care of those people? Who's the most at risk, and how do we take care of those people?
Yeah.
But suddenly we're anti-maskers because we said shaming people into compliance doesn't work. So I like to do a little more research. And depending on how you do research, I just saw another meme today. Don't do your own research. You don't know how to do it. You can't do your own research.
Because I remember the one from last year that was a news article.
That was a Forbes article.
You must not, in quotations, do your own research.
And what that means is you're idiots and you don't know how to do it, so leave it to the professionals.
How could you even think? Obviously, you can't even think about having done your own
research. Leave
research.
it to the mainstream media and the press secretary propagandist to tell you what's going on because you cannot figure it out on your own. Mm-hmm. That's what they're saying. So there's something to it. Like, if you're going to do your own research, I think it's to do good research and to be somebody who's going to share research, you have to understand the bias that you hold that you're looking through. Are you looking to confirm your bias, or are you looking to confront your bias?
Yes.
Do you know what your bias is?
I deliberately try to challenge my belief systems all the time because I don't want somebody else to come up and pop me in the gut and be like, haha, you were wrong. I want to be the one that finds out that I was wrong. But I think the problem is they're throwing the baby out with the bathwater these days. Yes. And they're saying, do your own research. Is it like the work I do on the internet every week is the same thing as someone who just went and found a news article that says the thing that they think is true and they think that was research.
Right. Oh, I just scrolled through Facebook and found something I like.
Or that, like, a YouTuber. Like, I find valid scientific information on YouTube, and then I go and I find a Journal of American Medical Association article about it, and then I go and I double check those stats with the NHS, the WHO, and the CDC, and a variety of aggregator tools that I have saved in my bookmarks. I cross-check everything.
Right. A lot of people don't do that.
And they say that everything is research, so nobody should do it.
Right. And if you do some research, it can put you at odds with the one-size-fits-all narrative. Mm-hmm. So when the one-size-fits-all narrative says either you must wear a mask or you're going to kill grandma.
Yes.
Or if you wear a mask, you're an idiotic sheep who's going to be taken over by the Nazis.
Right.
Right? So in that narrative, that's the one-size-fits-all narrative. There's no nuance. So if you talk about the mask and it's not in favor of one or the other, both sides of that equation will be convinced you're on the other side. That puts you in a very unpopular position. So it makes people who have done their own research, who actually question the official narrative of the nexus of media, government, and corporations, which is dubious.
Everybody should watch Robert Miller's History of Oil on YouTube.
Yes, Robert Newman. Robert Newman. It's Robert Newman.
Okay, it's in our syllabus.
There's money involved in this pandemic. Billionaires have gotten richer. Poor people have gotten poorer. There is a money motive in this pandemic and the narrative of the pandemic. If you don't think that money is motivating some of the narrative that you hear, this may not be the show for you. You might just want to check out now and go somewhere else.
If you live in a reality bubble, and we all live in various reality bubbles, I happen to live in a few, and I do my best to be able to be free to move beyond reality bubbles when I'm presented with new information. And sometimes I try to not exist in any sort of reality at all and just stay open to possibility. But if you live in the reality bubble where you believe that finances don't motivate the news and the government, this is probably not the show for you.
Mm-mm.
That's like step one,
so
unfortunately.
this is the issue with the media. And
because it's proven.
It's knowable.
It's knowable. It's not a guess.
It's not a mystery.
No, it's not a guess.
It's not a conspiracy theory that there's an unholy nexus of corporate media and government. That's not a theory. You can go find the threads and understand the profit margin. You can understand, you can talk to journalists who no longer work for the mainstream media because they had to write shit about Trump every day. Didn't matter if it was good or bad. If you just say Trump, suddenly somebody's going to read it, and that's a profit margin. That's a conspiracy. That is a conspiracy that happened within this nexus. But if you talk about it, you're a kook.
Right.
So this is my perception of why this is dangerous. Is you don't, and the same thing with the thing that we just read earlier. If you are not getting good information, the whole point of a democracy is you have to have an informed populace in order to be a democratic republic. If they are going to vote, they have to know what they're voting about.
Yeah.
If we do not have accurate news sources, then we are not an informed republic. We are sheeple. I hate that term because it's been used horribly. But if you are just reacting to the news and the reports, you're not getting journalism and you're not informed. You're getting one-size-fits-all information.
Yeah.
And anybody who has a different idea, who's not doing what the TV people say, you look at as suspect.
What could we say is like a really super basic way? Say you don't have a lot of time. Say you don't have a lot of energy. Say you never feel like you're unqualified because you never took a class on media analysis. Whatever.
I never did either.
Neither did I. But say you're a person that's setting up all these ideas for yourself that you just need to find someone to trust. Like if you're a Republican, you should be reading a Fox News article and an MSNBC article on every subject. And if you're a Democrat, you should be reading an MSNBC article and a Fox News article on every subject.
Why would I read the other side? They're the wrong guys.
So that you can see how different the other side is, which will help you be freer to question the story that you're hearing on your side. You can compare and contrast the adjectives everybody's using. You can compare when you hear an elderly person tell a story about their day at the park and you hear the 5-year-old tell a story about their day at the park, you're going to have some common threads and some conflicting threads. And you will be able to realize which of those threads are things that factually happened, the ice cream truck drove by, and which of those threads are things that did not factually happen. Grandpa yelled at me and was a meanie, which is the 5-year-old's perspective of why he couldn't have any ice cream because it was right before dinner.
Right.
And the grandpa's perspective is a completely different story. And so when you see the contradictions between the two stories, then you can start to be like, okay, I need to figure out which of these contradictions is the real version of the story. Did grandpa actually yell at the kid, or did he just say he couldn't have any ice cream?
If you were one of those people that cheered on Rachel Maddow for finally exposing the Russia Gate thing that went on for 2 years, and finally we're going to get to it never got anywhere. It didn't do anything. And you didn't explore the other side. You thought Fox was wrong, and they probably were wrong too, wrong-headed. But some of the things that Fox said, making fun of MSNBC going after Russiagate, was correct. Because it turned out Russiagate was incorrect.
Maybe we're a show that gets more emotional and spanks people more often. Maybe we tried really hard to stop spanking people and be really logical and kind. Maybe
it doesn't work.
Maybe we should spank people more often.
All right,
if you think Rachel Maddow was so with it about the Russia thing,
she's a great storyteller.
Then you're being brainwashed.
Yeah, you were brainwashed by
that?
Rachel
Does that
Maddow.
help?
If you were just waiting for it to finally bring down Trump. If you watch the MSNBC through the entire campaign, Trump's about to go down. It's finally gone too far. We're going to bring him down. Every fucking week for 4 years. And people bought it maybe this time. Oh, maybe this time. Oh, maybe
we'll
this
just
time.
get spicier and yell more, and it's going to be great.
So I just made a post.
Some people are really going to love it.
This is kind of an aside. Post-Orthodoxy on the YouTube and on the Facebook. I made a post to the COVID-19 risk tools. I'm just throwing this out there. You can fill out a couple of little boxes and figure out your personal risk, depending on your age, your health, and where you live.
Yeah.
You can find out which your risk is of dying from COVID.
This tool was available on ncov2019.live, which was
This is Johns Hopkins University. Right. This is totally legit. Sorry.
That's okay. I was just saying a Jewish teenager in Seattle created this aggregator tool with algorithms back in the beginning of last year, in the
Right.
beginning of the pandemic. And now John Hopkins has done one. So like
the risk assessment tool.
yeah.
So anyways,
yeah.
Johns Hopkins, so
The
it's very
NCOV
official.
the
It's
NCOV
official now.
The NCOV 2019.live kid, who was
Yeah.
one of the first people collecting stats of who had died,
Data, right.
who was sick, what country, how much percentage up or down.
Right.
Like he had very early on in the pandemic, he had a risk assessment tool based on all the data we already had in like June of last year. We already had enough data globally because it'd been around for like 6 months to say who's at risk, where they live is a factor, how old they are is a factor, how large they are is a factor, like
Right.
all of these things, heart disease, smoking, pregnancy, diabetes. Like he created that. Now John Hopkins has made one. John Hopkins and the University of Maryland research team.
Yep.
So,
So go find out what your risk of dying is, and then look at the news through that lens of your personal risk.
oh, but Dark, it's not about me. It's about the people that are at risk.
This is why we are not going off the deep end and finding every BitChute video about what's the real story of coronavirus. You can find enough information in mainstream news if you are discerning to sort of get a better picture of what's going on.
We don't have to go digging for
No.
crazy doctors.
We don't have to say crazy shit.
From Ghana in white lab coats standing, like in front
No.
of an airplane. We don't have to go finding stuff that's hard to verify to question the mainstream story.
The mainstream
This is
story
enough.
questions the mainstream story.
Yes.
And I'd like to give an example right now.
Okay.
Do you want to show the video of Psaki?
Yeah, I have it.
And you have the timestamp?
Yeah.
It's from 104. This is Psaki. The Politico, which is a very left-leaning news website, Politico, this is their headline. Psaki excoriates criticism of Biden administration
That's
work
an amazing word.
on vaccine misinformation.
Excoriate.
Yeah.
I need a new battery in my keyboard.
On your keyboard.
Excoriates. Censure or criticize severely.
Yes. So they spanked the reporter for asking a question, and frankly,
She was like,
and the reporter's question was leading.
yeah.
He was, his question was fucked up because he's like, so you're spying on blah, blah, blah. And she's like, no, these are actually Facebook pages.
Yeah.
You don't spy on somebody's public Facebook page. So she's right in that manner, and the journalist was a jerk
For framing it that way.
for framing it that way because
Stupid.
it's leading. So
you
they're
frame
both
stuff
assholes.
like that. Of course, somebody's going to tear your question apart.
So can you just play that short clip?
Yeah.
It's from 104 to 122.
Yes.
Let's hear what she says.
On Facebook, information that
Oh,
is
why?
traveling
No.
Doesn't work.
No, it does work.
I can read it.
No, give me a second.
Okay.
Because I fixed all of this.
Okay.
So,
We got a lot of new buttons to learn how to work here. Stick with
no,
us.
I fixed all of this. So I don't. Okay. I tested it so many times. Give me a second.
Oh, wait, I see her there.
Yeah, she's there. She's just not saying anything. It's this. It's this. It's this. 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 Yeah.
Whoops.
I'm so.
Okay.
Wait.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
God, this is so annoying.
Stick with us, folks.
Okay. All right. Well,
I'll just read it.
yeah, just read
'Cause
it, I guess,
have the
because
text.
that's all we
I have
got.
the text prepared. No, but you can look at her face. You can look at her face and pretend she's saying this. She said, our biggest concern, and frankly, I think it should be your biggest concern, is the number of people who are dying around the country because they're getting misinformation that is leading them to not take a vaccine, Psaki said during Friday's daily press briefing. Young people, old people, kids, children. A lot of them are being impacted by misinformation. So it's almost like she's saying they're all dying, but then she pauses and goes, they're being impacted by misinformation. Now, speaking of misinformation, I think this idea of fighting disinformation, I don't think you fight disinformation. You can counter disinformation with good information. Often good information is boring. This is why a lot of people don't like our calm, cool, collected shows.
Right.
There
Good
needs to be
information
some
is boring.
emotional impact. So she has to bring up the children. We have to think.
Just bring the children into it, and then people will have feelings.
Right. So right now, this is an article from the Wall Street Journal, came out today. written by a guy named Marty Macari. The title of the article is "The Flimsy Evidence Behind the CDC's Push to Vaccinate Children." So I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs here. We'll read, and you can stop me anytime you want to clarify some stuff.
Okay.
Because I think this is important. And do you have a link to that article? Can you put a link to that article in the comments?
Sure.
I think this article is worth reading. This is not BitChute. This is not AlexJones.com. This is the Wall Street Journal. A tremendous number of government and private policies affecting kids are based on one number, 335.
Welcome to my art.
That is how many children under 18 have died with a COVID diagnosis code in their record.
335 children?
In the U.S.
Okay.
They have died with that code in their record.
Okay.
According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Yet, the CDC, which has 21,000 employees, hasn't researched each death to find out whether COVID caused it or if it involved a pre-existing medical condition.
So how many people did you say it was?
335 kids.
335 people under 18.
Yeah.
As of 2010, there were 74 million people under 18.
Right. So, that's the first paragraph. And the language that he's using...
0.0004% of kids under 18 died of coronavirus.
Not of. With that on
died
their record.
While having the coronavirus in their system.
Being diagnosed with coronavirus.
Okay.
And he gives an example in here, and it was the one that people lampooned a long time ago. A kid has the coronavirus, they have a healthy immune system, they're riding their bike, they get hit by a car. Mm-hmm. If it's in their system, they died
of coronavirus
in the report,
yes.
But not of coronavirus.
Death certificates
they died with.
Changing how we wrote death certificates is something that happened in the early days of 2020. Unfortunately, they've completely switched how they code death certificates.
This is not conspiracy theory. You can look it up. We've already talked about it.
We've already been over this a year ago. That was a
right.
big change that went down in the health organizations on the planet to change how they code death certificates. Are you okay?
Let me go further. The next paragraph. Without these data, the CDC Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices decided in May that the benefits of 2-dose vaccination outweigh the risks for all kids 12 to 15. I've written hundreds
Who said that the benefits of vaccination outweigh the
CDC.
risks? Okay.
So the author then says, I've written hundreds of peer-reviewed medical studies, and I can think of no journal editor who would accept the claim that 335 deaths resulted from a virus without data to indicate if the virus was incidental or causal, and without an analysis of relevant risk factors, such as obesity.
Or diabetes.
This is the next paragraph.
Okay. Of this Wall Street Journal article.
This Wall Street Journal article.
Wow.
My research team at Johns Hopkins, we all know this, everybody loves Johns Hopkins. They're reputable.
They're like one of the few places you can't politicize very much.
My research team at Johns Hopkins worked with the nonprofit Fair Health to analyze approximately 48,000 children under 18 diagnosed with COVID in health insurance data from April to August 2020. Our report found a mortality rate of 0 among children without a pre-existing medical condition such as leukemia. If that trend holds, it has significant implications for healthy kids and whether they need 2 vaccine doses. The National Education Association has been debating whether to urge schools to require vaccination before returning to school in person. How can they or anyone debate the issue without the right data? Well, I guess we can.
Oh, plenty of people do debate the issue without the right data.
The news is full of it.
And then plenty of people think that we can't debate the issue because we can't know the data.
So this is a very simple distinction. Of COVID or with COVID. This is part of why we were banned from your local community radio station here in Butte, Montana, because we were trying to say the difference between of COVID or with COVID. Mm-hmm. Why do you hate my grandma? So I'm going to skip down and read a couple of other little tasty bits from the beginning of the article. I'm not going to run the rest of the article. Mm-hmm. You can read it yourself if you care. think it's really important.
If it's triggering for you to talk about COVID, we could talk about HIV. Lots of people died with HIV in their system.
Let's not go there.
That did not die of AIDS.
It's true. Lots of people have HIV, never got AIDS.
Lots of people have HIV in their system that don't die
Did
from
not affect
AIDS.
them. Yeah. Anyway, let's just trigger everybody today.
This is our new show style.
Okay. Meanwhile, we've already seen inflated COVID death numbers in the U.S. revised downward. This is an article from today. Last month, Alameda County in California reduced its COVID death toll by 25%. After state public health officials insisted that deaths be attributed to COVID only if the virus was the direct or contributing factor.
You know, Texas is not very hot in liberal circles right now.
Yeah.
Texas recently just made it legal to sue and fine anybody known to be helping anybody get an abortion $10,000.
Wow.
So if anybody helps anybody get an abortion in Texas, whether that's the doctor or the boyfriend or the best friend or the parent that drives them, they could be sued $10,000. They could be fined $10,000 and then sued.
What does that have to do with this?
That, speaking of emotional drivers in conversations, if you say Alameda, Texas reduced its COVID
California.
numbers. Okay. I thought you said Texas.
Alameda County, California.
Okay.
It's where Disneyland is.
Oh, that's pretty
It's
liberal.
A massive population.
It's pretty liberal.
So Alameda County is huge.
Okay.
So 25% of the people that they thought died from COVID or of COVID did not. A quarter of those numbers that everybody went and they shared, oh my God, this many people. Not true. They're revising it down now. Here's another paragraph.
They're not the only place that's revising down either.
The subsequent morbidity and mortality weekly report of that analysis revealed that 45.7% were hospitalized for reasons that might not have been primarily related to COVID-19. So that article is worth reading. This is why we were banned from your community radio station, is because we were saying maybe we need to look at the numbers more closely.
Why did we say that we should look at the numbers more closely? Why can't you just wear a mask and stick it out?
Because of the mental health of my community. So many people were afraid, which brings
mental health is more important than actual physical health.
I think some mental health is really, well, it does affect your immune system. Also, tidbit, smelling other people's farts is good for your immune system, and I've seen no reporting of that since 2017. The fart smelling phenomena, which is supposed to improve your immune system, I think it's been suppressed by the mainstream media. I do have an article on it, though.
My thing is wigging out.
Sniffing your partner's farts could help ward off disease. Now, this article came out before coronavirus, so I can see why they suppressed it.
Uh-oh.
Here's some tasty facts about this. When we're sick, our cells create their own hydrogen sulfide, which helps keep the mitochondria, our cells' power generators, in working order. Without the gas, our cells die and lose their ability to fight off disease. Researchers at the University of Exeter discovered that hydrogen sulfide, your farts, could help the body ward off illness. Experts have created a compound called AP39 to help the body produce the right amount of hydrogen sulfide. Or go to Taco Bell. The compound is believed to help reverse mitochondrial damage in cells, a key part in treating conditions such as a stroke, heart failure, and diabetes.
Mitochondrial damage is fancy scientific code word for age.
Right.
If your mitochondria are not aging, then you are not aging.
Correctly. Yes. So anyway, I'm not going to go too deep down the rabbit hole of why fart smelling has been suppressed in media to up the numbers of COVID. Can you smell if you have a mask on? Not if you have 3 of them on. Anyway, I want to go further with the panic paper. I'm going to share a link. This is a Twitter. What?
I just have been pushing the wrong button for the last 5 minutes trying to figure out what was going on.
This is a Twitter feed. I cannot vouch for this cat. I don't know if he's a Nazi. I don't know if he's a trans activist. I don't know if they are a trans activist. I don't know anything about this person, but I did find this because I've been looking for an English translation of the German, what they're calling the panic paper. And I posted a link on the YouTube and Facebook feed so that you can look into the full documentation. The panic paper was a paper that was put together within the German government around March 2020 because they were going to let the lockdowns open up somewhere around Easter. Mm-hmm. And this group of people said, let's try to keep that from happening, obviously for the best reasons. So I'm going to read some of the bullet points. There's like 23 bullet points. I'm going to read a few of them that might entice you to go read this Twitter feed. And whether you like this guy or not in his feed and his style, because I think his style is a little grotesque, it's worth finding the English translation of the panic paper, which has been, this newspaper article was only a half-page newspaper article, and it's come from 200 emails between all the government and scientist people trying to put together this paper.
Have you considered copying and pasting the panic paper into Google Translate?
Well, now it's translated. You could do it in Google Translate.
Okay.
But somebody has done an official translation, so you can find it.
Fantastic.
The panic paper. Federal Minister of the Interior, this is in Germany, Horst Seehofer, sent his Secretary of State, Marcus Kerber, into the lane. I don't know what that is. I think it's this area where they were doing this thing. The plan was to bring together leading scientists. They should produce a paper that would then serve as legitimation for further tough political measures beyond Easter. It's now known as the panic paper. In a worst-case scenario, they painted, if Germany did nothing more, then 1 million people in the country would be dead by the end of the pandemic. So this was the premise. They said, find a way to convince Germans that if they let up the lockdown, 1 million people will be dead.
Okay.
At this point in Germany, the death from coronavirus officially listed, which may go up or down, is 91,000 people.
Oh, wow. Out of 84 million people.
91,000.
Okay.
Just to give you an idea, because they were painting a worst case scenario. And I get it. You want to do risk management. You want to figure out how to keep people safe. So if that's the premise, you come up with the worst case scenario. Problem is, this is government handpicking some scientists to find the data to support the 1 million people dead premise. The researchers were by no means acting as independently as scientists, and the federal government had been constantly emphasizing since the beginning of this pandemic. But they were working toward a predetermined fixed result dictated by politicians. The result was available in only 4 days. That secret paper, stamped for official use only, about the looming prospect of up to 1 million dead. It also said how to achieve the desired shock effect in society in order to avoid this worst acceptable case. So in other words, we're going to traumatize the population. This is what the desired shock effect is. And they did it with painting scenarios of like having commercials where the commercial shows the family rushing to the hospital, but the hospital's too full. So all the people were just dying, gasping of air at home. Or campaign for the little children to show the little children that because they're immune to the thing, they're going to kill their grandma and be responsible of the deaths of all the adults. This is the picture they were painting for the kids.
That's so illegal.
That's the desired shock effect. The scientists also made a concrete suggestions on how to address fear and readiness to follow in the population. So the spreading sense of powerlessness must probably be held in check by the impression of strong state interventionism.
Say that one more time.
This is one of the scientists. He said, the spreading sense of powerlessness from this campaign they were setting up must probably be held in check by the impression of a strong state interventionism.
So we
in other words,
we need people to panic, but not so much. So we'll let them know that their government is in charge, and
the government is in charge.
That'll keep the panic at an acceptable level.
We'll make them panic, but we'll keep it in check.
Everybody will comply, but they won't go nuts.
Because we'll just trust the government, which is exactly what happened in the United States. Suddenly, the left, which used to be critical of the deep state, used to be critical of pharmaceutical companies and big corporations, used to be critical of mainstream media, are now suddenly like, we should just do, this is during Trump, right? The Trump is in charge of the government, and everybody's like, well, we should do what the government says, I guess. I hate Trump, but we should just totally do what the government says. We did the same thing here, and they did the same thing in England. England has its own paper. We're going to bring that to a future show. It's the same psychological warfare that was used on the population to make them afraid so that they would comply to avoid the million dead. It turns out that it wasn't going to be a million dead. It turns out that the lockdowns did not significantly lower
the ultimate amount of death. Yes. This is data that you can find. You can find that data yourself if you like.
These are excerpts from the German Panic paper, the Twitter feed, where he does more analysis of what that paper means.
Yeah.
And now there is a call to have all 200 of the letters between the scientists discussing this made public.
Yes, please.
So I think that's important. So when you're listening to the news here in this country, if you're in Germany and you're listening to the news, what the government was telling you was by a bunch of hand-picked scientists meant to create a scenario that was not true, just in case it might be true.
Yeah.
But it wasn't true. Now people, even though we know that scenario is not going to happen the way they feared it might, or said they feared it might, even though we know that now, the population is still operating under that fear, and they're still unfriending their friends and creating enemies within their own families because of the fear that the government put in them. The same thing that is happening in this country.
Brainwashing.
It's brainwashing. You've been brainwashed.
It's brainwashing.
If you bought the mainstream media, governmental, pharmaceutical nexus story, you have been brainwashed. And who got rich? Follow the money.
Yeah. This is something that
we've been
saying for a long time. We follow the money. Like,
there is a virus. People are getting sick. We know who they are.
Yeah.
We know who is at risk. And there are also treatments. And I know people don't want to hear that. There are certain things you can do at the early onset of the coronavirus to mitigate.
Oh, that Oxford professor. Oh my gosh, there's an Oxford professor that's like suing the Health Institute in the National Health Service in the UK because they kicked him out for protesting the vaccines. And he's like, he brings up all of these points. This is a physician bringing up all the points that we brought up last year. I'm going to find it. We'll talk about it on next Monday. But like this,
I've already got a rebuttal to it.
To the Oxford professor?
I was, the person I've been going back and forth with.
Yeah.
He says, he was fired for not wearing a mask. I would have fired him too.
That's not a rebuttal to the points that he brings up scientifically.
To the 3,000 points that he brought up about why this is terrible. Yeah. Some of the points are that you cannot make a mandatory vaccine for something that is treatable.
You cannot make a mandatory vaccine. You should not be pushing and proselytizing a vaccine and rewarding a vaccine. You should not be pushing, proselytizing, or rewarding a medical treatment, a vaccine, an experimental emergency use only medical treatment when there are other treatments available that are known to be effective.
There are other treatments available that are known to be effective.
There were treatments in Australia. There were over-the-counter treatments in Sweden. There were treatments in South Africa. There are treatments that are known to be effective against the symptoms of COVID-19 caused by the SARS-CoV-2 virus.
Those treatments don't make people rich.
Just neither does ginger.
This is why we can't get widespread MDMA and therapies because the patent is expired. Anyway, so this is the daisy chain that I've gone through. I think we connected a few dots there. This is the problem with mainstream media and your adherence to it. We've also talked a lot about availability bias. If they say it 3 times, it is true. That is the old trick of the Nazi. I think who was the Nazi guy who said that?
Nazi propagandist?
Nazi propagandist. Public relations man.
Oh, no, he was a propagandist in Nazi land, I think.
Right. And today he would be called a public relations expert.
Right.
Basically said, say it 3 times and it's true. Just keep repeating the lie. Keep repeating the lie and people will believe it through availability bias. When they hear the truth after they've heard the lie so many times, they will just say, I haven't heard that so much, so I guess I'll go with the lie.
Right.
This is the problem with mainstream media, there's a lot of lying going on.
It's in a poem by Lewis Carroll.
Say it.
The Hunting of the Snark by Lewis Carroll.
Yes, say it.
Just the place for a snark, the bellman cried, as he landed his crew with care, supporting each man on the top of the tide by a finger entwined in his hair. Just the place for a snark, I have said it twice, that alone should do for the crew. Just the place for a snark, I've said it thrice, what I tell you 3 times is true. And he goes on. And it wasn't a snark, but he just keeps saying it, and the crew goes along with it because that's what they've heard over and over again.
That's what they've heard over and over and over again.
Oh my God.
So just wear a mask. And yeah, we should vaccinate the kids because why should we vaccinate the kids, Ainsley?
Joseph Goebbels.
Yeah, Goebbels. Why should we vaccinate the kids?
You should vaccinate the children.
Even though, what is the risk of a kid getting
0.004%? No, that's the risk of them dying. That's the percentage of kids in the U.S. under 18 that have died. 0.004%.
And not necessarily of it.
And not necessarily of it,
With
just
it.
with a positive test somewhere in their medical records.
The CDC and the WHO basically say it's near 0% risk for kids.
Yeah.
So why,
especially kids under 12.
So why should we vaccinate the kids?
Because, Dark, it's not just about their health. We're worried that if the children don't get vaccinated, they could become an asymptomatic carrier and give it to someone that they love who is compromised.
So look up asymptomatic carrier and the CDC. And they will say, in our research, asymptomatic transmission is near 0.
Yeah.
That's the CDC website. I didn't make that up. The asymptomatic story came from Germany. At the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lady from China who had a business meeting and some people got sick. And they said, well, she wasn't sick, so it must be asymptomatic transmission. And that story was galvanized all around the world. Well, it turns out she was totally sick and she was taking all kinds of flu medication and keeping a stiff upper lip to have her meetings.
Which is what we've been trained to do by the modern commerce situation.
So the asymptomatic story that initiated the mask wearing of healthy people came from the story about this Chinese woman keeping a stiff upper lip and pretending she wasn't sick when she was absolutely sick.
Which we've all gone to work like that, haven't we?
And we haven't been able to let go of the asymptomatic carrier thing since because of the panic people.
Because it's the perfect boogeyman. The asymptomatic carrier story is the best way to just shut people up.
Yep.
You shouldn't ask about it. You shouldn't try to change things. You shouldn't try to change the rules. You just have to do all the health stuff because asymptomatic carriers. It's the perfect shutdown. If asymptomatic transmission is real, then everybody should be vaccinating and everybody should be social distancing and everybody should be wearing masks. And if asymptomatic transmission is not real for SARS-CoV-2, then we have a completely different situation on our hands.
What is the risk assessment for asymptomatic carrying? Go ask the CDC and then see how you feel. And then go check out your risk assessment for dying from COVID-19 and then see how you feel. I am going to share this very important article from 2017. This is in the New York Post about how smelling farts can improve your immune system. You heard it here first.
Do you feel like we've been...
Why are they suppressing the farts?
Do you feel like we've been emotional enough on this show?
Yeah, let's see how it goes.
No, that was pretty fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
We didn't even get to the new space race or freedom of speech versus terms of service, but I think it's kind of interesting how our first 3 topics are all connected. The fourth estate is dead, freedom of speech versus terms of service, and the new space race are they all involve the oligarchs.
I'm hoping to have an article that I've been working on about the First Amendment versus terms of service, and just the briefest thing because it goes back to the Biden propagandist, public relations lady, press secretary, where she says, yes, we are looking as the government flagging certain social media people, telling the social media people so that they can do with them what they will.
Telling Facebook, telling Instagram, telling YouTube. And FYI, the government has flagged these people.
And by the way, they're also proposing that if Facebook, even if we don't say anything, if Facebook decides to ban somebody, there should be
Universal ban.
Universal ban. So if somebody says something that the U.S. government does not agree with, they can remove you from the social sphere. And we have the First Amendment in America, don't we?
Oh, but social media platforms are terms of service agreement dependent, not First Amendment agreement.
So when the U.S. government goes to the place where everybody does discourse and says, hey, maybe get rid of those people.
Oh.
Do we still have a First Amendment then?
That does sound pretty fishy to me, actually.
It's up to Facebook. You signed the terms of service agreement.
Yeah, I know that Facebook can decide I'm not allowed to talk about certain things.
But when the government starts telling Facebook that we should be checked, that crosses the line from a terms of service agreement.
Yeah.
That goes from government intervention, and that should be against the First Amendment.
Somebody explained it to me this way before. They're like, if you're wondering if this is the jurisdiction of your government, check and see whether it's them telling you to do something or them telling you not to do something. Because most of the time, governments are only supposed to be there to prevent you from doing bad things. They're not supposed to be there to dictate all the little things about your life.
Right. So I understand that misinformation is a problem. There's a lot of hysterical people. And because of this one-size-fit-all nonsense in the media to dumb down the news so that all the people get it, scare them into compliance, because we have that, that makes people feel like that we can have censorship, because when you dumb it down, there are people who say, but I want to know more. And they're going to look for answers outside of what a good, healthy government should be doing, which is providing you transparent information.
Yeah. Well, no, your media is supposed to be providing you transparent information.
Well, it was supposed to. That nexus is so fucked up. So no wonder people are going down conspiracy rabbit holes.
Right.
So I saw a thing today. VAERS. You know what VAERS is?
Yes.
It's I forget what it stands for, but it's
Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System.hhs.gov.
Right. So traditionally, and this is information that comes pre-COVID, traditionally that was set up so that if there's some new thing going on, there's a new procedure, there's a new vaccine.
Mammograms.
You should be able to report it.
Vaccines.
You should be able to report it to the government and say, hey, I've got this effect. And that helps the people who are administering the vaccine say, oh, well, who is this person? And so Native Americans are adversely affected in ways that African Americans are not. This is a way to refine the thing. So that reporting agency is a government reporting agency. It's not very forthcoming. If you go and you try to get the current VAERS numbers, you have to go through a lot of hoops before you can actually find the current VAERS numbers. From what I understand, 11,000 people have died from the vaccine or with the vaccine. I don't know.
Died while on the vaccine?
Died very close to after receiving the vaccine. Maybe they were just old. Unfortunately, with the COVID story, anywhere related to COVID, you died of it. But in the VAERS reporting, you might have had the vaccine and then had a heart attack and died, but it doesn't mean it was the vaccine.
It doesn't mean that you got a blood clot because of the Johnson & Johnson shot.
So
there's a lot of...
If we're going to talk about science, we should be taking these VAERS reports very seriously. Apparently, and this is not just the coronavirus and this season, they have actually the medical people have a mathematical model to say so many people have reported dying from this vaccine.
Yeah.
They have a mathematical formula. This is pre-COVID, where they say it's usually about maybe 10% is reported, or 1% is between 1 and 10% is reported.
Of all the people that have an adverse reaction, how many of them know about this website and take the time to go on the website and make a report, blah, blah, blah?
I believe it's 1%. So if the people that reported deaths related to coronavirus is 11,000, and you use the established model to understand what the larger impacts might be outside of people who reported, you're looking at around 100,000.
So far.
Total
in the planet?
No, just for the U.S.
Oh.
It's even higher in England. They have a thing called the yellow card system in England, where they report adverse effects, which could be my arm hurts, or it could be had a heart attack and died.
Yellow card, red card.
Right. So the yellow card thing is like, my periods are now gone wacky. Right. So this is stuff that you want the people who are administering to know so that we can warn people, find ways to mitigate the problem.
So, total vaccinated in the U.S. is 185 million people in the U.S. have been vaccinated so far.
Okay.
Out of 330 million people. So over half of the U.S. has been vaccinated at this point.
Right.
35 million people total were ever tested positive in any way for SARS-CoV-2 in the U.S.
And we've already talked about the tests, which, that's the other thing.
Well, no. Yeah. Let me finish my thing.
Right,
so the U.S. has a population of 330 million people, right? Mm-hmm. So 35 million people were in some way affected by SARS-CoV-2 according to the testing systems in place. So what percentage is that, like 10%? No.
These aren't people who got sick. These are people who had positive tests.
Just anybody that, was affected in some way, and it was notated. And you're saying it's possible that 100,000 people in the U.S. have died from vaccine complications so far in the U.S. So 100,000 people out of 185 vaccinated people. Let's just go over to my handy dandy calculation. So somebody can do these percentages in their head, and it's not me. 185. That is 5.4% of people vaccinated. It's quite possible, according to the data, that 5.4% of people who have been vaccinated in the U.S. have died from complications of the vaccine.
That's more than the percentage of the people who died
of coronavirus. Far, far more.
So this is emerging data that we should be paying attention to, I think.
Yeah. Why would we pay attention to data like this? Are you dissatisfied with your life, Dark? Why are you asking all these questions?
I have a lot of traumatized friends, and I would like them to feel better about the world that they live in, is really kind of the problem. I wanted to do this other little tidbit, and then we can wrap it up. This is another thing that I prepared for the show. So I'm doing some research, so I go to the World Health Organization, the WHO, WHO, and they have frequently asked questions. I was looking for how many people might have died from the vaccine worldwide, because it's a vaccine Q&A page. They didn't have any information on the WHO of who might have died from the vaccine.
The WHO, vaccine information.
So they have a vaccine information page, but it doesn't say anything about people who may have died from complications from the vaccine.
Okay.
There's no information. But what I did find was this. And here's the question. The question is, can the COVID-19 vaccine cause a positive test result for the disease, such as for a PCR or antigen test? The WHO, this is today, WHO says, no. The COVID-19 vaccine will not cause a positive test result for a COVID-19 PCR or antigen laboratory test.
So I'm like, well, that's a little surprising from just right there. What I know about vaccines is that they are giving you a tiny version of that illness.
That's not a vaccine. No, they changed the definition of vaccine.
Oh, right. These things aren't actually based off of the coronavirus mRNA. They're based off of other mRNAs.
Yeah, it's not so it is a vaccine. I'm not going to debate that anymore, because also literally means figuratively now.
Right. We've changed the definition of vaccine.
And vaccine doesn't mean what it used to mean.
We've changed the definition of pandemic.
According to Merriam-Webster, mRNA gene therapy is a vaccine. So we can end the debate now because the dictionary says it is.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay. Oh boy.
The COVID-19 vaccine will not cause positive test result for a COVID-19 PCR or antigen laboratory test. And they're going to tell you why.
Okay.
This is because the tests check for active disease and not whether an individual is immune or not. The WHO has this on their webpage today. We know that the PCR test, you describe why that is wrong.
Okay. We screenshotted this for posterity, right?
The inventor of
let me
you say it.
The guy that created RT-PCR
Kary Mullis
process, the RT-PCR procedure.
Yeah.
It was not a test.
No.
It was a procedure
to amplify.
He was an acid head scientist, award-winning scientist in the 70s and 80s.
Yep.
And he wanted to study tiny pieces of life that he couldn't see with regular microscope amplification. So he created this process that involves
The polymerase chain reaction
test. Violent spinning, and solvents to separate tiny pieces of genetic material for visual observation so that you can see how much of each kind of genetic material is present in a particular sample. He said it is not possible. This thing is not, it's the PCR procedure only tells you whether there is genetic material present in the sample. How do I say that differently?
It doesn't say whether it's an active infection.
It cannot tell you if there is an active infection. It can only tell you that at some point you encountered some part of a genetic thing on the planet. It could be a virus, could be bacteria, could be a dog hair, could be blood, like whatever it is, it was in your nose.
Could be a broken piece of RNA from a rhinovirus that you encountered while shopping yesterday that you never felt.
Yeah. So it can only... The PCR process with solvents and rotations, violent spinning to shuffle stuff out, cycles, can only tell you that there is genetic material present. It is the guy in 2014, this new guy that formulated the PCR test that the planet used over the course of 2020 to test whether people had SARS-CoV-2 in their system. This guy said in an article, in an interview in 2014, that the PCR test is unable to tell you whether there is an infection present, and that even using it to detect genetic material is crazy because it is such a sensitive procedure. If you spin it enough times, it will always find genetic material because guess what? We live on a planet.
And if you use it to try to detect a virus, you could give the impression of a pandemic.
Just by spinning it more times.
That's one of the guys that was being convened to talk about the panic paper. He's one of the designers of the panic paper. He designed the test that he and his company made money off of, the PCR test, and then designed the panic of Germany, and then convinced the WHO, and he knows the PCR test. So every cycle is an exponential amplification of the material. It is not advised to cycle over 25 because it's like a Hubble telescope image. You look up and you see 5 stars. You take a Hubble telescope image and you're going to see universes and galaxies and supernovas, right?
Yeah. That's what the PCR procedure is like.
So they said anything over 25 is useless. So the WHO recommended...
If you spin it, if you amplify it more than 25 times, you will always find the presence of genetic material.
The WHO recommended that it be spun 30 to 40 times, which is known to be completely useless.
It's going...
As far as finding, the virus, and it cannot find an active infection.
It can only find the presence of SARS-CoV-2 genetic material in your system.
So let's go to today's WHO page where they say this is because the tests check for active disease and not whether an individual is immune or not. It is not true, and this is known.
The creators of the current PCR test and the creator of the PCR procedure in the 70s, the WHO is lying. They're just bold-faced lying.
That's not true.
That's bizarre. It is not true.
It's easily disprovable.
I have links to all of... I just need to start keeping a document of all of the bullshit. Like, I did this whole show last year on the test.
This is why you must not do your own research.
Is it research if I find the creator of the current PCR test saying with his own mouth that the PCR test is stupid?
It doesn't do active infections. It's not meant for active infections.
It cannot tell whether you are sick or not. It can only tell whether SARS-CoV-2 has been in you at some point.
And it's been in a lot of us at this point.
We live on a planet. That's what viruses do. The guy that made the PCR test version
cannot detect active infection.
Quoted in an interview in a German science magazine in 2014.
WHO says it can.
Fuck me.
Thanks for watching the show.
What is the point of all this?
We'll be more emotional next week.
Casey Ten Boom.
Yeah.
Oh, Corey Ten Boom.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, not the real Corey Ten Boom.
I don't know who that is.
A Jewish heroine.
Oh.
That saved lots of people's lives during World War. At least that's the story I was told about her. says, I think what it boils down to is we wait 5 to 10 years or whatever it is for FDA approval, or push it out now and take our chances.
Wait, say that again.
What it boils down to, and I think this is what a lot of people have come down to, is either we wait 5 to 10 years for FDA approval, or we push it out now for emergency use and take our chances. Which, if it were a zombie apocalypse, I would probably do that. But it's not a zombie apocalypse by the numbers. It is not a zombie apocalypse by the numbers.
No, well, you can. We posted a link to taking your risk assessment.
It is not a zombie apocalypse.
This is not disproportionately affecting the young and healthy, which used to be the definition of a pandemic.
A widespread illness, a widespread, rapidly spreading illness that disproportionately affects the breeding stock. And I'm sorry to say it so crassly.
It's true.
But we have to look at this globally and objectively. And why is that? Because of the auxiliary harms and the long-term harms that are being caused by the psychic warfare that's being enacted on people, mental health crises and breakdowns, as well as a whole bunch of horrible physical ramifications, long-term loss of home ownership, long-term loss of small business abilities, long-term loss of actual housing and food and well-being and child education. Like, there's so much suffering being caused by our reaction to this virus that would be justified if it was a zombie apocalypse, but it is not a zombie apocalypse. So the suffering is not justified.
Should I try to make a prediction?
Sure. Make another one. We've made a lot and they came true.
Okay. The Gamma variant, or whatever variant's going to come after the Delta.
Alpha, Beta, Delta, Gamma. Yeah, I got Gamma.
Right. So coronaviruses have been around forever. We've never had a vaccine for them because they mutate like crazy.
All the time.
Right.
We can't have a cold vaccine.
You can't have a vaccine for the cold because it mutates. So this particular coronavirus, whether it is from a bat or whether from a lab in Wuhan created by Dr. Fauci's business,
which
go down that
Biden
rabbit hole.
Just said happened.
Yeah. So Biden's saying it's likely it came from a lab. So whether or not, doesn't matter. People can't find employees for their shitty paying jobs now because
even if they're offering $20 an hour, people don't want to go to work.
Yeah. Because I think some people got to have a break from the rat race. Even though our pandemic unemployment insurance was dismal, I think a lot of people realized that they didn't want to spend their life doing bullshit.
They found ways to function outside of doing a job that had nothing to do with who they are as a person, just to survive.
So I think if we want to move down this road, which is what they're proposing, I think in England right now, is a monthly booster.
Okay.
So you get the pandemic, or you get the vaccine.
A monthly, not a financial booster.
Nope.
I was like, universal basic income.
A monthly vaccine booster for people who are susceptible.
Fuck, man.
So
for a coronavirus?
Yeah, a monthly booster, and they'll see if they can get that down to just whoever wants it. So everybody getting a monthly booster. So for that to happen, I think we're just going to have a lot more rhetoric around the Delta variant and then the Gamma variant. And then when winter hits us here again, perhaps they'll just do another lockdown. And because people remembered, even though it was horrible for a lot of people, businesses, mortgages, there's a lot of other people who are not tied to a business. They can't afford a house. They don't have a business. But they got unemployment insurance, and they started becoming a musician, and they started writing poetry. And I think it would be much easier to get people to comply on the next lockdown. Because if that means unemployment insurance again, where I get to be a poet and not have to be a barista, I think you may have a lot of compliance. Let's see if the lockdown comes again this fall.
I think that would make sense. They have to try to keep the panic alive as long as possible to keep people complying with the new normal. Whatever the motivation. I mean, even if you just say the only motivation for vaccinating the planet is financial, that's a mega motivation. So if they're trying to roll out as many vaccines as possible, then they have to, even if that's the only reason that they're trying to vaccinate the planet.
What?
Financial. Even if that's the only motivator, even if you leave all the other conspiracy theories aside, there's an obvious motivator to vaccinate the planet, and that is a financial motivator. So if we just look at that financial motivator, it would behoove the powers that be, the media and the government, and Big Pharma, to keep people panicked as long as possible not only will that cause people to get more people to get vaccinated, but it will also cause long-term detrimental health effects that will cause people to get hooked on opioids and mental health medications and physical ailment medications because of the mind-body connection. If you're in a panic state, you go into adrenal fatigue and suddenly everything starts shutting down and a cup of coffee just isn't doing it for you anymore. It affects your joints. It affects your how early onset dementia, hair loss, fertility issues. Adrenal fatigue is a big deal. And the longer you're in a state of panic, the more you're susceptible to long-term effects of adrenal fatigue. So that pays into Big Pharma's pocket as well if we keep people that way. I think it would make total sense if I'm looking at this from a financial perspective, even just a financial perspective, to act as though our regular cold and flu season is another spike of the coronavirus pandemic and just shut everything down again over the winter as if it's not normal for people to get sick and die over the winter.
So that is not a conspiracy theory. That is a hypothesis.
A prediction.
A hypothesis.
A hypothesis of what might happen this winter.
It's an educated guess.
Yeah, an educated hypothesis. That's what a hypothesis
I don't know if there is a conspiracy about that. It is not. I would say it is my hypothesis that if we want to keep doing this this great reset that is being talked about by the World Economic Forum, there has to be pressure and release to eventually motivate people into a new world. You have to create the tension and then give them release.
Yes.
The tension of 2020 was intense for a lot of people, and now people are feeling a great amount of relief.
Festivals are coming back.
People are having some release. And then unless there is some investigative journalist that breaks the story...
That's already out there.
There's a lot of data out there that shows that the way the pandemic was handled by this country, by England, and by Germany was suboptimal.
Psychologically manipulative and caused a shit ton of auxiliary suffering that is not justified by the death numbers of SARS-CoV-2.
The cost-benefit analysis may show...
if it's ever done.
It's being done. But the cost-benefit analysis will likely show that the lockdowns caused more harm than did good. We talked about this time last year, and the data is rolling in and making that seem like that's the case. It seems to be the growing data is that the lockdowns caused more harm than good.
At some point, probably next year after the next census, I'll be able to dig into the U.S. numbers more strongly and present how many people died from SARS-CoV-2, how many people died of drug overdose, how many people died of childhood malnutrition, how many people died from being stuck at home with an abusive partner or parent. And we'll compare all of those numbers and see if the lockdowns actually were worth it.
We tried to have a little bit of an emotional roller coaster today. We have our website coming out soon. We've refrained from doing the kind of show that we did today, talking about the kind of things that we talked about, because the reality of being deplatformed is very real. Luckily, at this stage in our career, we don't have very many people spreading us around.
Luckily? Yeah. So we can't get deplatformed yet?
We're not deplatformed yet.
I doubt we're one of the 11 people the U.S. government is keeping its eye on. I highly doubt that.
But we are making a move towards our own platform. We still enjoy using Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube.
It's the only things available to us right now to reach you guys.
With our audience. We want to continue doing that. We don't want to be deplatformed. We are not trying to be deplatformed. But as we were discussing earlier, when your news people will, with the same tone and same emotions, talk about the weather and a mass shooting, et cetera, I actually want to see a little emotional involvement in the topic.
Yeah.
And if what we're talking about right now is mass manipulation to the detriment of my fellow citizens, it's hard not to be emotional when talking about when you see something happening that your friends do not see happening. It's hard to not look like a sky is falling Chicken Little. And it's also hard to sit there and be quiet and watch people fold in to the propaganda.
Yes.
It's
especially
propaganda.
When they're folding into propaganda and brainwashing that is causing them more suffering than they need to be experiencing.
Let's do more work on our immune systems. This country and this society and most of the large industrialized countries did a fairly shitty job of informing people of how to protect their immune system so that when the virus hits them, because it's going to hit you.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Then you might be better prepared to not get sick. Your immune system, the terrain in which the virus lands, might be inhospitable to the virus.
Yes.
That seems to be something that we should be talking about more.
And we did try to talk about that last year.
Before we were banned from your local community radio station.
We talked about terrain theory versus germ theory.
Yeah, look up terrain theory
Louis Pasteur
versus...
is not as hot shit as you think he is.
Louis Pasteur realized that germ theory had flaws, and he said so on his deathbed.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think germ theory or terrain theory are both either right or wrong. I think there is a confluence of the two and can be integrated.
And we never talk about terrain
And we
theory.
just talk about germs coming to get you. We don't talk about the terrain in which they are coming to.
And the fact that
is it hospitable or not hospitable?
You're part of the terrain. You have germs, bacteria, and viruses in you. Like over 5 pounds of every person is genetic material that is not you. And I'm not talking about the cheese in your gut.
Yeah, we're actually a 30% cheese if you eat a lot of Big Macs.
Right. If you eat a lot of...
doesn't go away.
You eat a lot of like Velveeta and American cheese,
That's not
like
cheese.
fake cheese, then there's like...
A lot of these big white people guts is 30% cheese from fast food.
You could...
It doesn't go away.
Yeah. Like bubblegum in your stomach when you swallow bubblegum. It's there for like
more fun factoids.
7 years.
Join us on Thursday for our special guest, Andrea Crossguns, her real name.
We're going to talk about neurodivergence and the drug wars again, and it's going to be great. The more often we could talk about how the U.S. abuses medicine to make money for big pharma, the better.
I'm so looking forward to it. Please join us next Thursday at 5.
Paul Neal says immune systems equals conspiracy theory. Oh, I'm so glad. Right. So we had some people tune in here right at the very end of our show. Guys,
well, look, this is the show, and the idea of the show was more interaction with the folks. So
yes,
the folks that are watching right now, do you have any subjects that you want to talk about? Do you want to this is the audience interaction.
Yes.
The whole show is supposed to be audience interaction.
It's all yes, but some people just showed up. They just got off work. We don't know what happened.
We can sign off, or if you have further questions you would like to throw out into the forum, we'll give you a couple of minutes. What do you think? Anybody? Any takers? Any takers got anything to throw out there?
Oh, I'm so sad.
Is there anything that we said in the course of the show that you think we are terribly erroneous about, and we need to have we need to be fact checked?
Ooh, yeah, fact check me.
Where did we go awry? Please, we're not here to dictate. We are here to share our exploration of very, very difficult, touchy subjects. And if you can point us in a better direction, that's why we have you here. Help us help you. Help us find a clearer picture of the world in a very murky time.
Oh.
How's that?
Corey Tenboom, or Casey Tenboom / Greg, says, I watch the recordings.
Oh man, thanks for I really appreciate the folks.
We really love our lurkers.
and if you're watching the show after the fact, please comment. Please provide us with some kind of critique if you think that we're doing it wrong. And if you think we're doing it right, let us know that too.
And I know Twitch doesn't allow comments after a live broadcast has ended, but you can always send us a message on YouTube, Instagram, or Facebook, please.
It's true. Send us a message. Let's continue the conversation. Anybody else?
Paul Neo says, how do you see reconciliation with the Butte Public Station going down?
Well, he was privy to my conversation on one of the posts today where the treasurer of the organization, he's been a very good friend of mine ever since I've been in town. He was the only person at the Kangaroo Court that gave us kudos for being important members and contributors to the radio station, but also failed to
do anything
about the Kangaroo Court that we were in. So it's unfortunate because these are not just board members. These are all people that we know in town.
Yeah. They're not like elitist organizational board. They're humans. They're just humans who also happen to be on a board.
This is the problem. It's not a government conspiracy. No. There's no that I know of, unless Zorka worked for the CIA, which I think is probably not something I would
shake your nose
dismiss offhand. That we were taken out by Suzanne Stefanik, who's the board president and also close personal friends with my ex-girlfriend. That's, I don't know, correlation, causation. And I think that the hysteria was...
You got to stop doing that.
Sorry.
And
yes.
Look at the camera.
The hysteria was a lot of the panic over misinformation around the coronavirus was exploited by the board president and the members of the board.
How do you see reconciliation going?
I don't see it going. I think the only thing that could happen is everybody dies.
What?
Over time, and a new generation comes into the radio station and exhumes the past history.
They're like, this place used to be so rad.
Posthumous acknowledgement that we were unfairly treated by the political activists who abused their position as caretakers of a social justice organization. I don't see it happening. It's too much. The social justice organization has become a social club. We live in a very small town. This town is about 30,000 people. The people that are active in the radio station in Uptown are an even smaller clique, and it is cult-like. Our whole show was talking about cults, how they work, and how people get kicked out of them, and why people leave them. And it all played out in real time. So it's kind of a beautiful art piece, and I'm happy with it.
We're never going to be reinvited into KBMF while Zorka is the board president.
No.
And
she's instilled herself as the
And she will be board president until she dies or decides she doesn't want to be board president anymore, because any member of the board can choose to stay on for another term if they so wish, and if they are unopposed indefinitely.
Oh, you can go apply to be on the board.
No, I can't.
You can apply to be on the board, but it has to go through the committee to
It's a nominating committee.
Which she's on.
Yeah, which the board president is on. So
it's a kangaroo court. It's a banana republic. It's unfortunate. I love KBMF. I love the radio station.
I love the DJs. I love their shows.
And we're about to launch our own website, and we are very interested in becoming benevolent dictators. We thought about maybe starting a 501c3, but that would mean a board, which would mean a shit show in about 3 years when it becomes fun for them.
Paul Niehaus says, why is a public radio station labeling itself a social justice organization? So there are three kinds of radio. There's public radio. No, there's commercial radio, public radio, and community radio.
These are three different licenses.
So commercial radio is like McDonald's ads and car lot ads and pop
all
hits,
the shit that you hear all the time.
Public radio is like NPR or the BBC. It's going to have some McDonald's ads and some pop hits.
No, it's going to have underwriters.
Public radio?
Yes, which are massive corporations like Pfizer.
Oh. And then
they support
NPR.
And
then community radio is
non-commercial,
non-profit, non-commercial, and they can have underwriters as well, which means somebody donated to the station, blah blah blah. So
it's member supported, like public radio, but it is only a 100-watt station.
So they had to formulate articles of incorporation with an intention for what their goal was in creating this community media platform. And their goals were...
the nonprofit they were attached to had to have that.
Yes.
So you couldn't start the station without being attached
to a nonprofit.
So
they started a nonprofit, and the nonprofit's goals were social justice, education, and workers' rights.
That was, these were the passions of the lady, a local math teacher and local politician and union member, activist, and president. She's a president of one of the big unions over here in Montana. And those were important things to her. And she said, if we're going to start a broadcasting platform and a nonprofit, maybe the radio station will be the first step in a social justice organization where we can take care of education, workers' rights, funded by, of, and for the people of the community. It's only a 100-watt station. I was excited by the station because even though it's only 100 watts and it broadcast almost all of Butte, which was more than we thought it would do.
Right.
I was excited because you can also stream online, which meant we could talk to the entire world, which spawned a relationship with the Zulu Nation and a documentary and really wonderful relationships on the antipode of the planet.
Paul Niehaus says, aren't you a part of that aforementioned community? And theoretically, we are a part of the Butte community, but we are actively being deposed from being a part of the KBMF or Butte America Foundation community by the treasurer and the board, who reject and return any donations that we have made to the radio station.
As members of the nonprofit, we have rights. And so they gave us all our money back, so we're not members.
Yeah, that was the, rather than allowing us to attend the board meetings, allowing us to bring up issues with the membership, allowing us to request a review of what happened last year, they just gave us back all of our money.
So we can no longer be a part of we have no rights as members because they retroactively made us not members.
Demembered us.
They went back into the past and made us not people there anymore. They've erased us from the books and the records. They erased us from the website, and it's a cult. It's become a cult. In the beginning, we were concerned about the integrity of the organization. It wasn't so much about us leaving. It was about the choice that was made and
the precedent that's set.
The precedent that it was set so that anybody who disagrees with the cult of the board could be
just canned,
erased. We were concerned about that.
Yeah.
And it came to pass. There was another DJ on the station who was vocal on Facebook about how that was incorrect. And when his job changed and he asked the station, which happens all the time on the station, people move
all the time. People move slots.
So he contacted Clark Grant, the station manager, 13 times.
Over a month.
And never had his call returned. So he's no longer at the station. He was the only person who was vocally opposed to the choice, and now he is no longer at the station.
The only other people
It is
who...
a cult.
Yeah.
It is a cult-like organization. Mm-hmm. It is a social club, not a social justice organization. However you feel about social justice. If you say you're social justice...
You better be bucking some trends.
Be social justice.
You better be going against some mainstream shit.
This is why our catchphrase that we got, which is violating norms and community expectations, is on our new sticker. Because there was a former board member who wrote in and said they're violating norms and community expectations.
And they should go. And it's like,
and I was
what radio station are you a part of?
Wasn't the civil rights movement violating norms and community expectations?
Women voting.
Wasn't the gay rights thing violating norms and community expectations?
2 guys being allowed to adopt a child, violating norms.
So you're saying 2 people on a social justice radio station violating norms and community expectations is reason for them to leave?
It's bad because COVID. Because you just need to do what you're told so that everybody can be safe. Casey Tenboom on Twitch says, if COVID came from a lab, wouldn't they take into account people with a good immune system?
I don't know.
As in, maybe wouldn't they engineer COVID?
Something that was better?
No, wouldn't they engineer COVID to also zap people who have healthy immune systems?
So let's
not make it so easy to fight just by taking vitamin C and going for walks?
Let's do some conspiracy analysis. So I've read a lot of theories. The last show that we did on KBMF, we were approached by the former editor of the Japan Times.
That wasn't the last show.
It was the last show.
That was right after our last show.
That was our last show.
Oh my God.
He had been hearing our show at a local bar and remarked to the owner. That has since
banned us.
Which we have since been banned from as well. He remarked to the owner, these guys are lightweights. They don't even know the story. Like, they're not saying anything. But apparently what we said was enough to get us kicked off the radio in town. But he was former editor of the Japan Times. And he met us outside. I still have his handwritten resume of like all his credentials. He's a graduate of Berkeley School of Journalism. He's a journalist.
Doing an investigative journalist story on Laura Ingalls Wilder and something to do with the Blackfeet Nation. So...
So anyway, he did a lot of...
I didn't know Laura Ingalls Wilder needed to be investigated.
Independent investigative journalism on the coronavirus that I am not completely comfortable with. I've read it, and I'm like, oh, that makes sense. What? So maybe he's so far ahead of me, I have to catch up to him.
It is a natural,
Paul Niehaus, I will send you a link to his stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not going to share it publicly because we are still trying to keep a platform.
We're still trying to be,
and I would say,
marginally legitimate.
And I am not endorsing his perspective. I am only saying this is a trained journalist who has done some research.
Been investigating for decades.
And he's
like 75.
The reason I like conspiracy theories is because they're often better than most crap coming out of Hollywood. Because they have integrity, they have deep. They go into a tree of all the other conspiracy. They eventually connect to the Rosicrucians and the Sphinx and everything else. So, we were approached by this guy who said, you guys don't know the full story. I'll tell you the full story. So I've heard a number of stories around the virus escaping. I heard stories that it was a planned escape because this is from that guy, and I don't remember the name, but there was a convention of like elite military from various countries doing war games in Wuhan at the time of the release.
Paramilitary Olympics.
Yeah, it was called the paramilitary. You look it up.
This is a thing that really happens.
This is the paramilitary Olympics going on in Wuhan.
The best of the best come to try to fuck each other up for king and country.
And that's when the virus got loose.
And then they all went, phew.
And that's not a conspiracy theory.
Those are two things that did happen.
Those are two things that happened.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's causation or correlation. But my friend, the journalist who has not been in America for 30 years until he came into our radio station and told us that we don't know what we're talking about, but
you guys are pussies.
Yeah, that's what he said, basically.
You think you're uncovering some deep, scary shit. What you're saying is so mainstream, and we're like, so...
I like this cat. He's coming back to Montana. He's got a very expensive bottle of tequila. We're going to go drink and go fishing. Last time, we got shit-faced at a bar on multiple shots of Jameson until the wee hours of the night, and he told me all kinds of other things, which we have not talked about on the show for good reason.
Paul mentions Event 201, a global pandemic exercise.
Yeah. That's something worth looking at.
That's a real thing.
It's a thing.
I thought this was like a conspiracy theorist name for a hypothetical thing, but this is a real thing. The Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, in partnership with the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, hosted Event 201, a high-level pandemic exercise on October 18th, 2019. The exercise illustrated areas where public-private partnerships will be necessary during the response to a severe pandemic in order to diminish large-scale economic and societal consequences. Casey Tenboom on Twitch says that if COVID came from a lab, why wouldn't they take into account people with a good immune system, like a better bioweapon?
There's
Joshua
a
Michael
bunch
says.
of different stories.
And what I said is what came to me when he asked that question, because sometimes you just need someone to ask you a question before it pops in. You're like, oh my God, you're right. They don't want us all to actually die in a zombie apocalypse.
No,
that is not good for the economy.
We're corporate livestock.
Yes.
It's important to keep us moving around.
It's important to remember what we mean to the people running the planet.
Right.
And having us all actually die in an actually deadly pandemic wouldn't be good for the economy. But having all of us psychically brainwashed into terrified submission is great for the economy.
Look up
just enough people dying.
Look up Event 201 and Plushie.
Plushie?
Yeah, because at that convention, this is before coronavirus was a thing in our world. They gave away a little coronavirus plushie to the
Shut up! No!
It's a little stuffed coronavirus they gave out as a gift to all the attendees.
I'm never going to be it. These plushies do not commemorate the 2019 blah, blah, blah. There's already like a bunch of people are like, mostly false. Fact check. Snopes.com. Oh my God.
You can look up Event 201. You can also look up Agenda 19.
Which we were talking about last year.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
These are real world things. This is not a conspiracy theory. They have websites. And they have websites. It's not a theory. You found the plushie?
It's not green. It's not green.
Oh, okay.
It's not green. They changed the color for the actual pandemic.
Oh.
It's orange. Oh my God. And Baby Yoda. Okay. All right. Let's just look at PolitiFact. These plushies do not commemorate the 2019 novel coronavirus strain. A small stuffed toy is fanning the flames of another coronavirus conspiracy theory. An adorable plushie drew attention to the October 2019 gathering called Event 201, which was designed to help plan for a global pandemic by bringing together business, government, and health leaders.
Global stakeholders, as the World Economic Forum calls them.
Okay. So,
I like to call them corporate shepherds.
So it is true that this plushie was distributed. No, wait. The toy at the center of the controversy is supposed to be a microbe.
Oh.
The fictional... Okay. Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security in October 2019 tweeted a picture of the stuffed microbe. So this was like right when everything was happening.
A month before the virus.
A month before we started knowing the virus was there.
Which was November-ish.
Tweeted a picture of the stuffed microbe as part of its Event 201 registration drive. See the story of Event 201 play out in real time and answer tough questions. Register today and be entered to win one of our 201 giant microbes. To be clear, the Center for Health Security and Partners did not make a prediction during our tabletop exercise. We modeled a fictional coronavirus pandemic, but we explicitly stated that it was not a prediction.
It was a hypothesis.
So if we say it's not a prediction, then it really wasn't. I'm channeling Alexis from Schitt's Creek. Soylent Green
You
is...
have to do this a lot.
Okay. So... They did distribute a plushie.
They did.
It's like a microbe. Soylent Green is people, says Casey Tenboom.
Yeah.
All right, Hillbilly brings up a topic. Benghazi happened, but the right questions were not asked.
Oh my God, I talked to my undisclosed Japanese reporter about
Benghazi
when we got drunk on
That's
whiskey
awesome.
that night. Yeah, because
our undisclosed bartender
was the first one in.
What? Yeah, his team.
Yeah.
I miss that era so much.
Some team. I don't know.
So Benghazi happened,
he was a contractor,
but the right questions were not asked. What war are we fighting in Africa that allows us to have troops there? And why are there no more ads to feed Africa?
Say those again.
Let's
go one at a time.
Is Benghazi in Africa? Yes. I just assumed it was in the Middle East because that's where we go do all our bombing.
The Middle East is in Africa. It's on the continent of Africa.
No, there's Africa, and then there's the Middle East.
Is that right?
Stubby part.
We're going to expose ourselves as fools.
Okay, where is Benghazi? Internet. Can't even spell Benghazi.
It's on Fox News.
Benghazi is on Fox News?
Yes.
What are you talking about?
Benghazi was on Fox News in the way that Russiagate was on MSNBC.
Benghazi is in Libya, which is on the continent of Africa.
Right.
And then the other countries that are... Okay, so Sudan is on the continent of Africa, but like Iran, Iraq,
that's Africa.
Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, these are in the Middle East peninsula, whatever that peninsula is on the other side of the Red Sea that's not part of the continent of Africa.
The Middle East.
I don't know what it's called. This thing.
So
why the fuck did we? It's because it's in Libya.
So yes, I would really recommend watching Adam Curtis. What was the piece on Adam Curtis?
Hypernormalization. I know that's the one where he mentions Putin.
Putin. Hypernormal. He talks about Putin, and I think it was I don't know if it was hypernormalization or if it was
Century of Self.
The one that came after Century of Self.
Can't get you out of my head.
It was about the war on terror. Anyway, look up Adam Curtis and Gaddafi. Gaddafi was a very interesting character.
Power of Nightmares.
Power of Nightmares. It explains a lot of the Middle East, what happened in the Middle East with the U.S. and why we never fuck with Saudi Arabia and why we always fuck with Mr. Muammar Gaddafi. Gaddafi was an acid head. He did a lot of acid, and he wrote the thing called the Green Book. And in the Green Book, he thought, what would be great is that since we have oil in our country, we should just nationalize it.
So that the citizens get the money for the oil?
Proceeds to the citizens.
Shocking!
And he was a dictator, and I'm sure there was a lot of people that suffered under him who did not agree with him.
You are sure about that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, when you're a dictator, there's always somebody trying to undictate you. And like the CIA, for example, especially if you have oil. So look up Gaddafi and the Green Book and Adam Curtis. He does a really nice breakdown of Gaddafi's relationship with the United States and how we used him to be our boogeymen until Hillary Clinton decided that she would go and kill him. That's the famous line. We came, we saw, he died, and then she laughs hysterically. It's a really creepy video. But we used him as a puppet to be our boogeyman in news stories for years. And then he wasn't going to use the dollar anymore. I think he was going to go to the euro. He created his own currency and was basically trying to better. That was the story. He was trying to better his people. So proceeds from the oil ended up going to the citizens, and he wanted to stop trading oil in dollars. So that's what happened with Gaddafi.
So
and that's
Gaddafi has to go.
He has to go. Same thing happened with Saddam when he decided to trade in euros instead of dollars. He had to go. Mm-hmm. That happens a lot over there whenever they decide to get off the petrodollar. So I don't know the full story of Benghazi, except that when you start looking into Benghazi and you start looking into that country and you start looking into Gaddafi, you start finding out we have a really fucked up relationship with those people. And then they just killed him and we don't talk about it anymore.
Well, it's because freedom. Because we're going to go and save the U.S.
After we killed Gaddafi, where if you look up his program where he was giving X amount of dollars and cars and free education and all that stuff, when you look up his program, after they killed Gaddafi, slave trading markets in the streets. That's America spreading democracy.
Baby, that's probably just
they were
correlation, not causation.
Trading slaves in the streets after they killed Gaddafi.
In the modern age.
Yes. Probably still.
Oh my God.
I don't know that for sure, but that was a thing that happened after we killed Gaddafi.
Well, do you feel like we've had some amazing extra hour with friends? Thank you so much for you guys that stuck around and brought up some interesting topics to talk about. We have no way of knowing what time to live stream is acceptable, so we just try to be consistent and start at 5 p.m.
Start at 5 Montana time.
Montana time, unless we have a guest from overseas who we don't want to keep up until 3 a.m.
Yep.
And sometimes we start a little earlier. If you want to be alerted when we start streaming, there's a little bell on YouTube. You hit the little bell and it will let you know when we start streaming.
Yeah.
And then you can join us at the beginning and direct the content from the very beginning. And then it's not just us farting around yelling about stuff.
Give them we have a Post-Orthodoxy Facebook
page.
No, a Post-Orthodoxy YouTube page with the name on it because everybody liked it.
That's right, youtube.com.
And you can keep liking it if you haven't liked it yet. So it's YouTube / Post-Orthodoxy. It's not a bunch of...
So there's the subscribe.
gibberish.
This is how the algorithm screws with people that are trying to have these sorts of conversations. Right. Is you click subscribe and then we're just in your subscribe list, right? And then... But you don't get notified. You only get notified about some things. So if you like our Facebook page, you'll only get certain notifications. But what you have to do is click follow. You have to like and then also click follow so that you do see it whenever we go live. And then you can be a part of the conversation. Same thing on Twitch.
And also, if you're watching this in the future,
yes,
please comment. We will get back to you on those comments.
Yeah. Or if you're watching in the future on Twitch, I think we know Casey Ten Boom.
Yeah.
They say next time you're in Pryor, we're going to go to El Royale for some healthy cheeses.
It's the best, longest running Mexican food.
I love it.
In Pryor Creek, America. We like to call it Pea Creek. Pryor Creek.
Pea Creek, yeah. Hillbilly says Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, Cuba, and North Korea were the last countries to adopt the Federal Reserve.
I am going to
just keep going all night.
I'm going to share one more thing before we go. It's that article. It's that snarky article.
Which one?
It's the article that I posted on my page. We've got to fight disinformation, says Empire made entirely
this lady was so great.
Disinformation. I'm going to post this in the comments. Please read this. This is great bathroom reading.
I'll read the first paragraph.
Yeah, read it.
The weirdest thing about the Biden administration tasking itself, this is the government, with the censorship of disinformation on social media is that the United States is the hub of a globe-spanning empire that is built upon a foundation of disinformation, maintained by disinformation, and facilitated by disinformation. This is just what you guys have been saying, as in remember those places that we bombed that we had no right to be bombing? That a lot of people in the U.S. don't think... Know that. Many people in the U.S. do think that we were legitimately overseas saving people from dictators.
Democracy.
Saving people.
There's a reason the term banana republic is out there, and look it up, and you'll understand a lot of U.S. foreign policy.
Banana republic?
Yeah, look up banana republic. This article is from Caitlin Johnstone. Second paragraph goes, if the propaganda engine of the U.S. centralized empire ceased actively deceiving the public about the world, it would collapse immediately. There would be mass unrest at home and abroad. Status quo politics would be abandoned. Alliances and coalitions would crumble. Leaders, official and unofficial, would be ousted. And U.S. unipolar hegemony would end. Anyway, it's a compelling article. A friend of mine said, like using the word like entirely of definition is a little disingenuous. I'm like, the word literally now means figuratively.
Right.
Maybe the word entirely means partially now.
Yeah.
Just read the article.
Can we just
good.
talk about the topic instead of
Yeah, maybe entirely does mean partially now.
Check this out.
What?
Oh my gosh, Hillbilly just dropped one here at the end of the show. The Titanic was sank because the opponents of central banking were on board.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
What?
Yeah, you got to watch that. You got to go down that rabbit
Oh
hole.
my God.
There's some conspiracy theory in there, but there's also factual history.
Wow.
You decide.
Motherfuckers. If you think they can't get you now, bitch, they got the Titanic. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have tracking.
They got the unsinkable Titanic.
Tracking devices. Oh, I'm going to go down that rabbit hole.
No, that's a good one.
Oh,
that's a good one.
Fun. Very fun. Guys, this was a really high energy show.
Good conspiracy theories tie it all together. Because there is one big conspiracy, as some people say. I don't know if there is or not. But there is a thread of...
finance.
All the kid shows that I grew up with, Super Friends, Scooby-Doo, they were trying to tell us something. There's a bunch of big assholes that are fucking everything up, and we've got to band together and deal with it. That was the programming of me as a kid in the 80s.
Cute.
There's a bunch of asshole oligarchs that got you by the balls, and unless we band together and use our powers, they're going to keep doing it. I guess we didn't listen.
Or we did, and it just takes more time, and we
take-
can't perceive the changes that are happening because we only live for 80 years.
They've got a good head start on us.
Yeah.
Who's they? What do you mean by they?
You're delegitimized because you said they in an oblique way.
Yeah.
Now we have the tough question of whether or not we go to the gym or we go and get a drink.
No, we're going to the gym next. We have to improve our immune system.
Yeah, but also drinking.
We can go to the gym and then go drinking in our gym clothes. I don't care.
Ew. Don't be passé.
We'll do the hot tub after the gym.
That's gross. Well, thanks for this cool show. Thanks for this cool show,
Gym
guys.
and then shower and then hot tub? And then bar.
Yes. Okay. You guys are great.
Nobody report us. We're responsible.
We're not going to get
goers.
in the hot tub sweaty, okay?
We're not going to do it.
Nobody wants to see that.
Okay, thanks for playing. I really enjoyed the show today.
Thanks to our future friends and our present lurkers.
What we get to do is on Twitch, we can go through and cut out some juicy bits. And we've been doing that a little bit.
Who has the time?
But I think we're going to do it this week because we have some nice...
yelling moments?
I don't like being manipulated. But I got manipulated by people like Alex Jones at one point because of their emotions. And if you go back and look at Alex Jones' record, a lot of the crap that he was like, people made fun of him, like gay frogs, it's true.
Yeah.
Like, they're turning the frogs gay.
Yeah.
It's true. That was a factual thing. But the way he said
we don't necessarily need to be sad about it.
No, but
I'm just saying.
I don't know how the frogs feel about it.
Yeah.
But he said that, and people always use that clip like, look at this lunatic. He's saying they're turning the frogs gay. Well, we are turning the frogs gay. Go look it up.
So
but the way he did it was
theories.
very manipulative, and it looks dumb when you take it out of context.
Yeah.
If you don't get the lead up, he's like a Southern preacher. If you don't get the lead up of like building the energy, and then he does it on purpose. He gets himself worked up so he can be a ranting lunatic because then he is a person, he's a surrogate
for other people's emotions.
Other people's emotions.
They feel like they don't have a way to express their emotions about
so he
things
works
they're
himself
frustrated
up,
about.
And then he starts frothing and spitting and sweating, and his face is red. And people who've gone on that ride get a release.
Like a chemical. I don't know if I want to go quite that far with our show.
We'll talk. There's room.
Okay, guys, we're going to cut it off.
The pledge drive.
Look, we got to cut it off.
All right, bye.
We got to cut it off.
It was fun.
You guys are great. We'll see you next time. Tune in Thursday, 5 p.m. MST, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. in Hawaii, and 1 p.m. in the European Union and Africa. I don't know what time it
All
is
that
in
from memory?
I think
That's amazing.
I type it up a lot. And then 1 a.m. in the EU.
Thanks
2
for playing.
a.m. in St. Petersburg.
Spread the word.